As the veteran QB market dries up, maybe the Browns should trade for Joe Milton. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. The Browns may be looking for a quarterback in all the wrong places right now. Maybe there's a trade candidate out there in Joe Milton with the New England Patriots. We'll talk about that, plus grading this team's offseason moves to this point, and has Deshaun Watson really played his last snap for the Browns. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends and throughout the week as well at times. All you have to do, hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discuss in the comment section today. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So we know what the situation is with the quarterback market at this point. The Browns are in sort of a waiting game. All these teams are sort of in a waiting game. Aaron Rodgers hasn't made a decision yet. He's the one holding things up. Once he decides, I would imagine Russell Wilson sort of follows suit and the dominoes fall from there in terms of what teams are getting what quarterbacks that are even left on the market. There was a report this week that the Browns have mutual interest with Carson Wentz if Russell Wilson falls through. So that sounds like there's some conversations going on there. But as we talked about, like all these names that come up, none of them scream like, none of them are going to make you feel good as a Browns fan. None of them are going to make you feel like the team is fixed. They have their quarterback situation resolved and it's all, rainbows and butterflies from here. And that's just the nature of the beast. When you're relying on the free agent market to find a quarterback anyway, it generally isn't going to work out in your favor. And so with that said, I think it's opened up the door for people, myself, others, to start thinking outside the box in terms of ways to acquire a quarterback. We know Kirk Cousins could be a candidate to be traded for. It sounds like he's going to wait till after the draft now for that, or the team's going to wait till after the draft to potentially move him. That seems to be like the latest reporting on that situation, but the Browns could still maybe get him via trade. But I think that there was a comment made this week by former Cleveland Browns quarterback Brian Hoyer, also a Cleveland native, about the possibility of the Browns seeking a trade with the New England Patriots for Joe Milton. And I actually think like his comments are sound. And again, if you're looking for a quarterback, if you're trying to find something out there to bolster this room and make you feel better about the quarterback situation as a whole, like it's not a bad thought process to go get somebody who still has some room to develop and grow. His exact comments, this was on an interview with 92 to the Fan on the Ken Carman Show with Anthony Lima. And he said, knowing what you know about Joe Milton after a year in the NFL, a preseason that opened up a lot of eyes, the talent, the size, the athletic ability, and what he did in that last game. He's referring to the last game he played of the season, Week 18 against the Bills. He put up some decent numbers. When I watched the film, I would take Joe Milton over any quarterback in this year's draft. And he kind of went on to elaborate a little bit on, what it would take to acquire him, how the Patriots have sort of said a third round pick is what they're looking for, but that they'd probably take like a fourth round pick. And so I don't know if the Browns want to give up a fourth round pick for Joe Milton, but I also don't think like if you're doing sort of like the comparison here of like fourth round pick for Joe Milton, it's not a bad idea if you're going to be drafting two quarterbacks anyway, right? Like or if your plan is to draft two quarterbacks, so then you get two young ones and you can kind of start fresh with like two different perspectives, two different possibilities of guys panning out. And I do think there's something to be said for the Browns, like drafting two quarterbacks this year anyway, and sort of seeing if one of them pans out the same way that that Washington did with RG3 and Kirk Cousins. There's that name again. When they came out in 2012. So like it's not unprecedented to do that. And that's essentially what you would be doing. Is like you'd be trading a fourth round pick for Joe Milton. Give yourself two young quarterbacks that you get a chance to really get your hands on and develop. And Milton showed something in the one game he played. and, a year sort of sitting behind both Jacoby Brissett and then Drake May, that there's something there. So like enough that I'm intrigued. Joe Milton was 12th on my quarterback big board that I laid out leading into free agency. I liked him more than Russell Wilson, and I stand by that. For me, like this all would come down to, and what it would come down to for you as a fan of this team is like, do you like the idea of a veteran that you kind of know what to expect? That would be your Russell Wilson. That would be your Kirk Cousins. That would be your Carson Wentz to some degree. But so do you like the idea of that in this room because of like the experience factor and having somebody who can sort of nurture a young guy and who's been there and seen some things that can kind of be the elder statesman of the group? Or do you want an unproven young quarterback with untapped potential that Kevin Stefanski and company can develop? The answers might be different from person to person. Like you might feel that, you don't trust Kevin Stefanski to develop these guys, so you don't want him. You don't want another young quarterback. You want somebody that you kind of know what to expect. But somebody else might think like, no, you know what? I'll take the two, like a drafted young guy, and I'll take the guy who has a year of experience and see if one of them potentially pans out to be our franchise quarterback. I don't think you can go wrong with like either thought process. I understand both of those, but I do think the idea of Joe Milton is intriguing because he's shown enough to make you want to see more and believe that there's something in there, while also like not quite having been completely unlocked as a player. And so, yeah, it'd be taking a risk, it'd be taking a chance, but a lot of this is taking risks and taking chances. I mean, I talk all the time about how the draft is a crapshoot. Whoever the Browns take at number 2, you think you have it all figured out with that player. They might get it wrong. How many times have the Browns missed on like top 5 picks throughout their time as a franchise, especially since the team returned in 99? Like it's never an exact science the way that we think it is, whether that's a quarterback or other positions just in general, but a quarterback especially. And so why not, try your hand at trying to get a young guy, pair him with another young guy and sort of be on your merry way. Now, the biggest dilemma here is like, if you do that, if you go that route, you are preparing essentially to probably start your rookie quarterback sooner rather than later. But I don't think that's a huge deal. Some people might. Like I know there's certainly people out there who think giving your quarterback a redshirt year of sorts where they get to kind of sit and just learn is still important, but that's not the way it really works in the NFL these days. So I don't know that I buy that, but I understand where that philosophy and that mindset comes from. But I mean, that used to be the way of doing business with these quarterbacks. So you're sort of drafting a guy and expecting like maybe Joe Milton earns the starting job, but then you're like, well, he's got a short leash. If things go awry, we're going to go right to our rookie. But I think that would be the case for any quarterback, whether that's Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, whatever. But to me, like I love the idea of like the untapped potential, like the finding a level of somebody's game that hasn't quite been realized yet because it's an unknown. And I get that can be sort of scary, but it can also mean that like you find don't like the idea of like having some stability in the quarterback room if they were to get a Kirk Cousins. I've been on the Kirk Cousins train for a while now, but I only wanted Kirk Cousins if it was going to be for the vet minimum, that 1.2 million that they would have signed him for if he was released. And so that's the biggest dilemma for me, and the biggest hold up with Kirk Cousins is I don't want to trade a draft pick for him. So keeping in mind what Hoyer or just thinking through what Hoyer had to say, I'm intrigued by the idea of like it's not the end of the world at this point with what's left on the quarterback market to snag a guy who has some there's something there, and maybe you can help him realize his full potential and become a great quarterback. And if not, you have another rookie that you're about to draft waiting in the wings to potentially be that guy as well. And you do it to keep in mind here, like Hoyer was calling Pats games this year. So he has a different perspective on it all. Sure, people will feel like there's a little bias there because he plays Hoyer played for the Patriots, but also Milton plays for the Patriots. But I do think the things he highlighted about his game are fair and reasonable and correct. I don't know if I would take him over Cam Ward. I don't even think I would take him over Shador at this juncture, because I really still think Shador can be a great pro. And I said that on my quarterback big board as well. Those two guys are 1 and 2 for me, or 2 and 3 for me, excuse me. Over the only one who was ahead of him was Matt Stafford. But I don't, given where things have how the dominoes have fallen, given what's left, on the veteran quarterback market, I'm open to something like Joe Milton. I think it would make a lot of sense if the Browns were to go get a quarterback with that sort of with untapped potential, or the potential to be great, over even a veteran that you kind of know what to expect, because I don't like, none of these veterans are like blowing me away enough where I'm like, yeah, you know what, the Browns really need to go get that guy, I guess, is the larger point here that I'm trying to convey. Browns haven't made a move. Well, they made one move at quarterback, but they haven't made that bigger move with a veteran at quarterback to this point. But they have made some moves. I'm going to hand out grades 1 week into the new league year for all the Browns moves that they've made to this point, minimal or otherwise. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands on a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes the hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day of posting, multiple qualified candidates will be available to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale any business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now. Post your job for free. That's Upwork, UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with you with top talent to grow your business today. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing quite like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Last year, I used Gametime when I bought tickets to see Ohio State, Michigan. Yes, the result was disappointing, but I get to say I saw the national championship Buckeyes in person last year, and now Gametime is my go-to app for buying tickets. In fact, I just bought tickets to a concert a couple weeks ago. The concert's coming up this fall. They're for my wife's birthday, which is coming up here in a month. Keep that between us, by the way. She obviously doesn't know she's getting them. But I digress. Don't forget that when you use Gametime, to make sure you use Gametime Picks, providing you curation and make it easier to find better value on tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I think this exercise can be sort of fun as we look back on the moves that the Browns have made this offseason. And while they have been minimal in the grand scheme of things, I also think that they have been the word I think I used was practical. They've used a lot of they've made a lot of practical moves. Andrew Berry has done things that have improved the team at least marginally, and things that make sense given the team, the situation the team is in from a salary cap standpoint. So we'll sort of go deal by deal, move by move here, and I'll give you a letter grade for each and every single one of these. I will end with, we'll start with these signings, and we'll get to the trade for Kenny Pickett at the end. But the first one here is the signing of offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas. He signed a 2-year, $6.5 million deal with the Browns. And I give this one, I'm going to give it a solid B letter grade. I think this move made a lot of sense. Cornelius Lucas is a big body guy, chance to be, effective. He proved he can be a reliable starter over a period of time if needed. And he brings some things to the table, most notably the fact that he's versatile. He is a swing tackle, and you lose James Hudson III to the Giants, so he fills that void very effectively. And you now know, you have a guy that can play either side. And given how frequently it seems like the Browns tackles and just offensive linemen in general have gotten injured, it's nice to know that you have somebody you can trust to maybe fill in at either spot as, if needed at any moment. And so I think Lucas brings that to the table. And I like what his tape shows. This isn't like the sexy move per se, but as the Browns sort of sort through their left tackle spot, Jedrick Wills probably not coming back, as we know. They might put DeJuan Jones there, but you have a nice sort of you would have a solid option to go to if he struggles. And this could still mean that Andrew Berry's not done in terms of adding at that position. He's likely to draft a tackle at some point in this draft, I would imagine. And so maybe that's the guy they envision as like the future starter. And then DeJuan maybe goes back to the right side at some point. We'll see. But I think having Cornelius Lucas is a good move. He played really well in spots. He was one of the best pass blockers, according to PFF, in the NFL last year, like top 25 in pass blocking for PFF last year. So you feel like you got a pretty dependable piece there as a reserve or a rotational tackle. And I feel pretty good about him being added to this roster. Can never have too much offensive line depth, so I give that one a B. We'll go next to the signing of defensive end Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, former Bucks first-round pick. And that's the thing. I'm giving this a C+. I think like it's not going to be a signing like Tryon-Shoyinka hasn't been he hasn't lived up to being a first-round pick is probably the simple way to put it, and I think that's evident. Now, maybe it was a system thing. He was playing in a 3-4. A 4-3 might be better for him because he did enter the NFL as a defensive end. So maybe Jim Schwartz's scheme helps that cause and helps him unlock some things. The goal for him is to unlock or produce something in the line of like what he had the season he had in 2023, where he recorded 45 tackles. He had 7 tackles for a loss, 4.5 sacks. That's the type of stat line you're looking for. And if he can give you that, like that's solid. That's something that the Browns can certainly rely on, depend on, and feel good about next season as sort of a supporting role for Myles Garrett, obviously. And, you wonder what it means for Obo Okoronkwo with him now added to this roster, but they could still rotate those guys. I don't think they're going to move on from Obo just because, like, addition by subtraction, you always need depth along the defensive line. The Eagles won a Super Bowl that way. They have just waves of defensive linemen, and Jim Schwartz has won a Super Bowl similarly with the Eagles, doing a similar strategy with the waves of defensive linemen. We know he likes rotating guys in, and so it's a nice addition in terms of like adding some depth, but he's not like this standout great player at this point in his career. You're sort of hoping that he realizes the upper end of his abilities rather than some of the lower end of his abilities. If you get that, then it could turn out to be an even better signing for the Browns. But I'm giving it a C+ right now. This next one's easy. The Browns re-signing Devin Bush to a 1-year, $3.25 million deal. And this one is a great move, in my opinion, in my estimation. Devin Bush, surprisingly to some, had one of the higher linebacker overall grades via PFF. He was graded 79.2, proved to still be an instinctual run defender. Coverage lacked a little bit. He wasn't, when he first entered the NFL, that was like the idea, was like he was an east to west linebacker that could cover and do some things. Like people were excited about his athletic ability. I don't know that he still is that player, but he still played really, really well. And especially with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, potentially not being able to play football ever again. We don't have the full picture of that yet. It makes sense that you add or bring back somebody who's familiar with the system, played well in it last year, and that can provide that for you on some level if you need him to start next year in Devin Bush. So I like this move. I give this one a B, a solid B for bringing back Devin Bush. The one A grade I'm going to hand out in this entire list goes to the signing of Malik Collins to a 2-year, $20 million deal, defensive tackle. I'm giving him an A- for this. After moving on from Dalvin Tomlinson, the Browns obviously needed to find a replacement for the middle of their defensive line. Collins can provide that. He's 29, still on the other side of 30, at least for now. He was 7th among defensive tackles in pass rush win rate last year, and he had 45 pressures in 2024, which ranked pretty highly among all qualifying defensive tackles in general. I think he has a chance to be really impactful in Jim Schwartz's defense. And while they still need to add some depth, because again, defensive line depth is such an important thing in Jim Schwartz scheme and just for the Browns in general. I feel really good about this new addition to sort of anchor the middle of that defensive line in Collins. So I'm giving that one an A-. That brings us to well, actually, I should add that the Browns did make an additional move on Wednesday. The first move they made since last week, as they went out and they signed wide receiver DeAndre Carter from the Bears. Now, the biggest thing to know about this is he's a wide receiver, but they're bringing him in more so for his kick return ability. And he was one of the better kick returners in all of football last year. He had 479 yards return yards on kickoffs, and he returned 17 punts for 158 yards. He ranked in the his 15 returns of 20 plus yards were tied for 8th most in the league. He also had 2 returns of 40 plus yards last year as well. And his 479 yards in kickoff return yards was top 10 in the NFL. So he's been proven that he can effectively return kicks. Browns needed to upgrade their return spot, and I think they did that. So I'm going to give this one a solid, let's see, because I didn't have this in the written story that I did with this. I'll give that one a solid C+ as well. We'll give him a C+ for that signing. I think it makes a lot of sense from a special team standpoint, but wide receiver is still a massive need. And that brings us to the final move. I promised you I'd save it for last. Browns trading Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a 2025 5th-round pick to the Eagles for Kenny Pickett. I'm giving this a C-. Lowest grade I've handed out for these moves, which I thought, again, were very, very practical moves. We can all agree, despite the fact that Browns fans, maybe like yourself, spent several years kind of laughing at the expense of Kenny Pickett when he was wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform and playing not so great. I think it's fair to say he's an upgrade over Dorian Thompson-Robinson. The bigger problem is you had to give up a 5th-round pick to acquire him as well this year. And they haven't done anything else to address the quarterback room to this point. And that's problematic, obviously, because, well, you can't start the season with just Kenny Pickett and a rookie. That would not be necessarily a recipe for success with that position group. What grades do you hand out for the Browns offseason moves to this point? Again, I think they've been some smart moves given the restrictions they have with the salary cap. Nothing flashy per se, but they've been smart, and they've been moves that I do think help this team, get better in the grand scheme of things. It's just about how much better they'll be based on the names that they're able to add this offseason. But I like what they've done so far, and I think they're off to a solid start, despite the fact that they have some other massive things to still fill this offseason, which some of that will be addressed in the draft anyway, and we'll have to just keep on waiting for it. When we get back, we all sort of believe that Deshaun Watson has played his last snap for the Browns. But what if he hasn't? I'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, so I kind of wanted to avoid this topic for a while, and it got too much traction on social media, so I put it in as the third one today. But we all, I think, saw Deshaun Watson's workout video that he posted on social media, and it kind of made the rounds. People were sharing it and all these different things. And, it got me thinking, I think it got others thinking as well, about the idea of, what if he does come back? What if he does still have a path to playing for the Cleveland Browns? And it's interesting because there's nothing more. Well, I do think, how do I want to phrase this? Because I'm about to say that I think teams want to win, but there are certainly teams that operate like they don't really care about winning. Like their just biggest goal is hey, I own an NFL team and we'll throw some money at guys, but they don't actually do it the right way. And so I do think there's been evidence of that in Cleveland at times, that I think now the Hasms have changed their course. I think the Hasms certainly have prioritized winning. They try to listen to the right people in some respects. They did throw money at a problem in getting Deshaun Watson. can't blame them for investing to try to get that position figured out. They picked the wrong guy, clearly, and it's been a disaster. And so they'll have to own that. But I think I think the Browns at this point do prioritize winning is the point I'm trying to make. But aside from that, the other thing that these teams always want, ownership on down, is to be right. Let's just call a spade. Owners, GMs, coaches, they want to be right about these things. They want to, and when they are right, they'll let you know, like, hey, this worked out for us. This didn't work. Like, they don't usually admit when things don't work out, and they tend to admit that, and they tend to sort of make it known when things do work out, where they've done things correctly or they've drafted a good player or whatever. And so, yes, on some level, the Browns probably still feel like we want to be right about this Deshaun Watson thing. And so maybe there'd be a way where at some point he gets to start again and be the quarterback of this team. And here's the thing, like Achilles injuries, now it's a re-tear, so I'm sure they're going to be very, very patient with it. But there's a path where like he could be preparing to play in games again during the season and maybe have a path back before December to being to being on this team and being on this roster. Now, will the Browns activate him is the big question here. But, if the Browns still in their heart of hearts think that there's something in there and they want to be right about it, maybe they do. Maybe they do still see a world where Deshaun Watson ends up starting for them at some point. I don't know. The biggest thing for me, though, because, listen, we all saw the video. He was working out. I think on some level, he's working out at the team facility, so he's still around. He's making his presence felt. And he was in the video talking about how, people don't know me, blah, 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 whatever. It was like a big old advertisement for like his rehab, right? The same way Nick Chubb was having these like advertisements for his rehab, except the difference is the fans love Nick Chubb. But yeah, he's operating on this premise of I'm going to work my way back. And the Browns are obviously operating on this premise of like, hey, we just got to get him healthy and then we'll see what happens. But here's the thing, I think a lot of this is just how do I put this? I think a lot of this is just the how you have to handle the situation. Because he's still owed so much money. He's still on the books for so much money in Cleveland that he has to sort of he knows he's not getting cut. So he has to put on a good face and act like, I still see my future being great. I'm still going to be around. And here I am at the facility working out and all this different stuff. Like, I think he has to put on that show and that face right now because he knows the Browns are paying him a lot of money. And it wouldn't look good if he wasn't doing those things. And his image is already tarnished enough. Like, I don't think he wants to continue to have it get worse. And he kind of, I just feel like, knows like he's stuck. So he has to sort of put on that show. But on the flip side of that, I think the Browns also understand they can't move on from him. So they have to just kind of anytime they frame anything about Deshaun, it has to be like this open-ended thing. It can't just be like, well, that's it. He's done. So we have the luxury of being able to say I think he's played his last game in Cleveland. They can't say that just because of the nature of the contract. And so I get where both sides are at. I just find it hard to believe that he plays for this team again on a number of fronts. Maybe they don't care about their relationship with the fans because they made this move in the first place with understanding what it could mean. They stuck by him last season when he was playing terrible, despite what it could mean in terms of the relationship with the fans and how they felt. So I don't know, but the bigger stuff for me is they brought in an offensive coordinator in Ken Dorsey for Deshaun Watson. Now they fired him. And if you weren't sure he's going to play this entire year, I get why you would do that because you're like, well, we're going to have a different quarterback room anyway. But are they really just going to recycle offensive coordinators every year to cater to Deshaun's needs again? No, they've now tried that multiple times. It didn't work. So now it's either if Deshaun is going to play, he's going to have to do it in Kevin Stefanski's same setup, the normal offense that he runs, and just deal with it. So there's that factor of it. The fact that the Browns seem poised to draft a rookie here. They're not going to draft a rookie and then go back to Deshaun at some point. I think this is really just the Browns having to sort of swallow their pride a little bit and own privately because Andrew Berry did sort of admit that it hasn't gone to plan during his end of season press conference. It was the first time we got any sense of that from them. But they're not going to ever come out fully and say like, well, we made the wrong move, or we did the wrong thing. I think they feel like they did the right thing and trying to go get a better quarterback and upgrade that position. But, I think this is just like both sides being cordial until they can find a point to separate that makes the most sense for both parties. I still don't think he plays unless something absolutely tragic happens and you're like down the depth chart because everybody gets hurt. I don't think he plays for the Browns again, but I understand we're like seeing this workout video and it was this whole thing and this show of like, hey, I'm here, I'm bought in, I'm trying to get back and I'm going to be better than ever. First of all, he's already done that and we saw the results, so I don't think anybody's buying that. Not that you should ever like buy into these hype videos anyway that players put out. But on top of that, I just think it's a losing battle. I think both these sides will find the resolution or the mutual parting ways when the time presents itself. And it's an impossibility right now because the dead money associated with it. So they can't do it at this moment. So he's going to put on a good face and like do his rehab thing in Browns gear and act like he's bought in. But like, there's a reason why this is the first time we've seen him do that. He rehabbed somewhere away from the team and wasn't wearing like Browns gear while he was doing it last year with the shoulder thing. Like, this is the first time we've seen him do like a video like in the team facility, getting everybody hype about like his return to the field and talking about how he's going to come back better than ever and whatever. Like, it feels very contrived in that way, at least from my perspective. And I just think it's like both parties like putting on their own respective, smiling faces for the time being until a path presents itself where they can go their separate ways. But I wouldn't worry about that to this point, but I understand where for some fans, obviously that is something that seems to be some curiosities about it after the video that surfaced on social media, obviously this week. All right. That's going to do it for another episode of the Locked On Browns podcast. There will be more to come here on Friday, a Fan Friday. So send me your questions if you have any at @SpenceCito_. You can also comment in the comment section at the Locked On Browns podcast YouTube channel. If you want to get in on tomorrow's show, I'll try to take some questions on some of the more pressing things with the team. But make sure you hit that subscribe button as well and make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show, or you can keep it local by checking out the Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians podcast. Thank you for being an everyday with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland.